Hey everyone, it's me Lone. Hope you're doing all right. We are back. I've slept a little bit, but probably not enough, and I'm finally calmed down from the hype surrounding the Starfield release date announcement trailer. If you missed my reaction to it, I'll link it in the description below. But in that video, and also on Twitter a little bit, I talked briefly about how I didn't really give a damn that Starfield was being delayed for a second time. I used much more colorful language than that, but that's only because I was excited for one, but more importantly and to the point, I'm Australian. We like to swear. If you've ever met an Aussie, you know that, right? It doesn't mean we're more or less angry. It doesn't mean we're more or less upset. It's just part of our vocabulary. It's who we are. But anyways, in response to that, there were a fair few people that came out to me and said, "Hey Lone, look, I understand that you don't care, but there are a fair few of us that are legitimately upset and frustrated in regards to the news that Starfield's being delayed technically for a second time." Yes, it is for a second time. I'll explain why in a second. I'm sure most of you are aware. But a lot of people, were engaging in those kinds of conversations. So I want to do a standalone video about this in today's video because I do think it's worthwhile. I do think it's important to talk about because I absolutely do understand if people are upset or frustrated. I absolutely understand the concerns and the frustrations in regards to a game being delayed for a second time, especially when it is a decent length of delay from the original release date announcement. All I was saying in my video and also on Twitter is that I've considered all that. I considered everything that Xbox and Bethesda has said to us about the game. I considered the game being delayed once and then a second time, but even in the midst of all of that, I personally was just okay with the game being delayed again. I was just excited that we had a release date, but that was not to discount or disregard anybody else's valid criticism. So let's cover both of those arguments in today's video. If you enjoy it, please do like it. I'd really appreciate it. Subscribe if you're new, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I know everyone doesn't agree with me on this, and that's part of the point of making a YouTube video. You engage in a debate, you disagree with people, but we're all adults and we move on, right? So first of all, Starfield's first release date. It was 11th of November 2022, last year, right? Everything was going for that release date. We were so certain that they were going to hit it. Todd sounded so confident about it. They embedded the release date in the actual trailer. You couldn't just swap that out as part of an end slate. It was hard coded into there. So when it was delayed, or when the announcement for the delay came about, I was very surprised. A lot of us were very surprised. There was a good contingent out there that knew that it was coming, but I was very surprised, right? So that was the first delay. And then you had Starfield being a part of the Xbox and Bethesda showcase of last year, right? And in that showcase, which Starfield, again, was a part of, Xbox said all the games being shown in this showcase are coming out within a year. And that led up to essentially the first half of 2023. So that was, even though it wasn't technically a strict release date for Starfield, it was a rough window that Xbox gave us, and also Bethesda later followed up with in articles and stuff like that, right? So yes, it was technically a release date or window or period for Starfield. So when we just got the new announcement or the new release date announced for Starfield, that being 6th of September, that is obviously out of the first half of this year. So technically, yes, it is a second delay. You can't discount that. I think that there are things to be said about how Xbox left this kind of vague window open, and maybe Bethesda Game Studios wasn't totally on board, but they were part of the showcase. They shared that messaging around. So you have to say that it was a second delay. That is only fair, okay? So then in response to that, as I said, people have been upset and frustrated and concerned. I think it's important to start this video by distinguishing people that are just hating for the sake of hating and people that are actually legitimately upset. And that's why I included the term haters in the title and the thumbnail of this video, because I am not saying that anybody who is upset about Starfield being delayed for a second time is simply a hater. That is such an ignorant view to have, all right? You're not all just haters. There's a lot of you probably watching this video that were just looking forward to the game coming out in the first half of this year. Maybe you've planned leave. Maybe you just had your mind set to it. And you were just upset You were just upset that the game was delayed again, and it's going to be even that much more longer to play the game when you were already wanting to play it in November of last year, right? That is only a valid and understandable feeling to have. And heck, I feel the same. I wish I could be playing Starfield in the first half of this year. Heck, I wish I was playing it last year, right? When the game was first announced. That's when I was personally ready, you know? I had so many plans. I was ready for that game to come out last year, and I was shocked by the first delay that was announced for the game. So it's only understandable, right? Only understandable. You are distinguished from other people that are just hating for the sake of hating. I empathize with people like you way, way more. But there are other people out there, and you know exactly who I'm talking about. They're on Twitter. They're just, you know, fanboys of consoles, i.e. PlayStation or whatever it might be, that are looking at just using this as an excuse to hate the game, to hate Xbox, to hate Bethesda, and to hate Starfield. For whatever reason, I don't know why people like this have such a hard-on for engaging in these fanboy debates, but they do. And that is not who I'm talking about. Those are not the people who I'm empathizing with. I'm empathizing with the people like you that actually did give a crap about the game, and you're actually upset. So talking about you absolutely have valid reasons to be frustrated. It is not a good look for a game to be delayed twice. In my eyes, it's not necessarily a bad look, but it's certainly not a good look. It means something was wrong with the game. It means development was not progressing at the rate that the developer wanted it to. The game had bugs, it wasn't performing right, they weren't ready with the content, whatever it might be. Being concerned about a game that's been delayed twice, it's understandable. So I understand why people are upset, but let me explain to you why I think it was the right call. And why I am not necessarily angry or frustrated that the game is technically being delayed for a second time. First of all, obviously, it means that the game is going to be worked on in terms of bugs and performance and all of that kind of stuff. Really, the concern clearly here is the state of the game. And the most important thing that we all need to keep realizing is that they're coming off the bat of Fallout 76, okay? We all know the state of Fallout 76 at launch. It was a very, very, very rough launch. And that is probably underestimating the extent of it, right? And I was working at Bethesda at the time. I know this, you know, as equally as many other people out there. There were so many issues with that game, and it was not a nice feeling to wake up and having to deal with that every day. And this is Bethesda, in my eyes, not wanting to go through that again, not wanting to risk their reputation for a second time. They are just wanting to prove to the world, essentially, in my eyes, that they are good, that they are great developers, and they don't want to repeat a Fallout 76 again. Because if that does happen with Starfield, game's kind of over, right? It's going to be so hard for Bethesda Game Studios to claw back their reputation in the eyes of a lot of people that probably will just lose faith if the game comes out in a bad state. So in my eyes, them delaying the game the first time and now the second time is just to make sure that it's in a good state. And for me, that is always, always, always a good decision. It is not a good decision, or maybe it's indicative of a bad situation, if after 2, 3, 4, 5, however many delays, it still comes out in a bad state. Then yes, that is clear of a game that had a bad development, something wasn't right. But if a game goes through 1 or 2 delays and comes out great, that's a good thing, because they clearly were working on the game, they were doing the right things in terms of delaying it and fixing all the bugs, etc. So if Starfield does come out in an awful state, I will be the first here to say that what the hell were those 2 delays for? I promise you I will. I said that I would come out and admit that I was wrong about Starfield coming out in June. And I said that in my last video. If Starfield comes out in an awful state, I will say that. But we have to wait and see. These delays, we don't know whether it's a good or, like, you know, whether they've been effective or not until the game is actually released. So first thing I'll say why, you know, that's the reason why I'm not necessarily upset. Second of all, I've talked about at least how Starfield's marketing campaign needs to be decent. I've harped on about Starfield is a new IP, and Bethesda really need to communicate this game properly to everyone. I've said that this is not Fallout, this is not Elder Scrolls. You can't turn this game around in 2 or 3 months with such a short marketing campaign. That's why, you know, a lot of people that said, oh, I think Starfield's going to come out before Redfall in March or something, or April, it just wasn't happening. It wasn't happening. They could not turn that game around within 2 months. And clearly, by delaying the game until September, that had to be part of their decision making, because now they have the Starfield Direct in June. They've got 6 months until the game comes out. That is a proper marketing campaign once you have a release date. Now they can go hard with the date. They can go hard with all the information. We already saw more information about the story of Starfield in the last video as well. This is where things really begin and where they can communicate to people properly about what Starfield is as a new IP. We all like to think that Starfield is a really big game, you know, in the games industry and in Xbox's world and Bethesda's world. But we live in such a small bubble. If you actually talk to other people that have a fleeting interest in games or in the mainstream, whatever you want to call them, right? Talk to people if they know what Starfield is about. And how many of them actually do? I've done this. I've said this before. Like at cafes, when people notice I have a Fallout shirt, I'll ask them, what do you know about Starfield? The amount of people that don't know or have very, very little knowledge of Starfield is astronomical. Those are the people, the casual fans that Bethesda need to reach when it comes to a marketing campaign, when it comes to trailers, when it comes to billboards, all that kind of stuff. Those are the people that are going to make Starfield or turn Starfield from a good performing game in terms of sales to a great or an amazing performing game in terms of sales. Our hardcore Bethesda Game Studios or Xbox or Bethesda community is actually fairly small. We are in a bubble. So as much as we know, as we know about Starfield, there's a bunch of other people that don't, and that's who Bethesda need to target in a 6-month marketing campaign window. So those two reasons is why I'm happy Starfield has been delayed. It is absolutely the right call. But I still understand why you're upset, as I mentioned at the beginning. Now, I think there's another factor going on here as well. And if you watched Todd Howard's really great interview or podcast with Lex Friedman, in that podcast, Todd admitted that they were feeling the pressure of Starfield being Xbox's main title this year. And that has to go into this. I actually question whether Starfield would have been delayed again if Bethesda were not part of Xbox, because I think right now, Todd admitted in that podcast that they were feeling the pressure because if they screw up Starfield, it's not just a bad look on Bethesda and Bethesda Game Studios, it's also a horrible look on Xbox. Xbox is always under pressure for delivering first-party IPs and for delivering good games. They always seem to be a little bit of a step behind PlayStation and even Nintendo in that regard, right? And Starfield is meant to be the title that turns that around. They acquired Bethesda or ZeniMax for $7.5 billion, and this is the first really, really big AAA game that's coming out that's meant to prove everyone wrong, that's meant to justify the decision in terms of why they acquired ZeniMax for an ungodly amount of money. If Bethesda Game Studios stuff up this game, it is going to be horrible, and I think Todd and BGS, the team there, they know that, and that had to contribute to this decision 100%. So I think we need to consider that as well, that they're human. They don't want to upset people. Now they have shareholder expectations to meet, and it just must be such a complex and difficult situation to be in. Game dev is so notoriously difficult, and when you're in a public company like that, it just makes it 10 times harder. So I think we need to consider that as well. And ultimately, if we're talking about mismanagement, a lot of people are saying, Xbox is just mismanaging this situation. In my eyes, the mistake that they actually made was in the Xbox and Bethesda Game Showcase by saying that all games in the showcase are coming out within a year. That was probably their mistake, because that was clearly at this stage, especially with what's happening with Forza as well, it's probably moving out of the first half of this year. And now with Starfield, we know it's moving out of the first half of this year to September. We know that was much too bold of a statement to make, and Xbox can never do that again. They can never do that again. I get the idea. I get it. It showed that they were confident, that they got all these great games releasing just in the next year, but clearly it didn't work. Clearly game dev was too complex. And they shouldn't, and in hindsight, of course, hindsight being 2020, they shouldn't have made that statement, and they should never make it again. Really, that was probably the big mistake made, because if they never said that, we just would have had technically one release date delay, or one delay of the game. It would have been from November until September when they finally decided. But because that very rough window was given by Xbox in that showcase, it put all the pressure on Bethesda, and now you have to say that there's a second delay for Starfield. So Xbox can never really do that again, but I don't think it's necessarily pointing to mismanagement or anything like that. The one thing that I will say that I guess I am upset about or sad about, sad is the right word. I'm sad that this delay is now technically pushing back Elder Scrolls 6 and also Fallout 5. I think that's what I'm most upset about, because if Starfield came out in November, it means that Bethesda Game Studios would have started work on Elder Scrolls 6 much quicker, and they would have started work on Fallout 5 much quicker as well. But now, because the game is coming out in September, and then they have to fix it, like, with post-launch updates and bug fixes and all that kind of stuff, and then you have all the DLC, whatever it's coming out after Starfield actually launches. Then after that, they move on to working on Elder Scrolls 6. So it just pushes everything back. It's a snowball effect. That's kind of what I'm upset about. Not necessarily that we don't get to play Starfield for another 2 or 3 months or whatever it is, but it's more that Elder Scrolls 6 and Fallout 5 are coming when I'm bloody 40. But that's just a side thing. Like, who really cares? Like, we're going to get it eventually. But that's probably what I'm more upset about, or sad about. And I also saw Maddie mention in his video as well that he was surprised that the Starfield Direct was so late in June, and was surprised why it wasn't earlier. And it's also an awkward time as well. Like, it's around E3 and probably close to Xbox's other showcase that they're apparently still having. I totally get that as well. I think Maddie made a valid point there. The way I saw it was that they were getting Redfall out of the way because that's coming out in May, and then you have Starfield in June. It allows not only just Bethesda, but also Xbox's marketing machine and marketing campaign machine to focus on the one game and then move on to the next. Because if you're trying to promote both of them at the same time, kind of makes it hard. I think that's actually the reason why we got the release date announcement for Starfield this week, because as you know, there's a Redfall event happening at the moment, and there's an embargo for that's releasing soon, and we're going to get all this feedback and impressions about Redfall. So they got Starfield out of the way so they could do that. They didn't do that in the same week. I think the same reasoning is going on there as in terms of why they made the Starfield Direct in June 11th. So lots of things to think about in this video, but I do want to close on by saying I understand people's concerns, and I appreciate having a genuine back and forth. I really appreciated having the back and forth with Juicehead. That was a really great one to have on Twitter. And I think I haven't watched his video yet from today, but I think he expressed his thoughts in that video. And I understand people like him that are frustrated and that are upset. I simply am just okay with it. So that's all I wanted to say in today's video. If you enjoyed it, please like it. I'd really appreciate it again. And until next time, this has been Lone. Please take care of yourselves, and would you kindly keep fighting the good fight.